Anytime a bad guy says, "I wasn't trying earlier," good. Die. Oshinoko definitely had the strongest start of the season with the best first episode, but didn't keep its crown for the rest of it. Today we're gonna rank the top shows of the past season and try to answer 2 questions. Which anime won Spring 2023, and why was it Heavenly Delusion? Okay, I spoiled it right from the start, but does anyone think there was any competition even remotely close? I'll try not to spoil too much along the way because I would urge you to watch any of the shows on this list if you haven't already seen them. And this is Ori from the future here to inform you that everything this bitch just said was a lie. There are spoilers, all over. Why did I even pretend I was gonna try? Initially the plan was to talk about new shows because it's not really fair to compare a show that has multiple seasons already, since they've already had time to set up their stories. Because then Vinland Saga would just win everything, and that's not very informative, is it? But I will make one exception because I need to talk about Demon Slayer. Absolutely dropping the ball to the point where it could barely compete with anything this season. And before I get accused of being some contrarian hipster that thinks it's cool to hate on popular things, I'm a filthy shonen junkie. I'll watch any new shonen show, even if the plot is lacking, because I can still enjoy it for the dopamine rush that it is. And I really like Demon Slayer. It started off as basic as any other shonen, but I felt like it was improving upon itself with every iteration. Season 1 was solid, the Mugen Train movie was really good, and I was crying at the end of season 2. And then, what happened? The first episode was fine, and they did a good job of raising the stakes for what was to come. Yutaro was legitimately terrifying, and he was the lowest of the upper demons. And now they're sending 2? At this point I was convinced someone was dying this season. And it had to be Tanjiro. I like him, but it's getting a little ridiculous how injured he gets in each battle. And then it just takes one coma to get him back in working order. That's not how those work. Obviously I didn't expect Tanjiro to die. I didn't want anyone to die. But I just assumed it had to be a bloodbath. So what the fuck was this clown shit that was going on for the first half of the season? I'm pretty confident that Tanjiro would not have lasted this long against Yutaro, and this guy's 2 levels above him. And don't even get me started on Squiggles here. For all the shitty talk, this fight lasted 1 episode. These bad guys always end up losing because they fuck around too much. Why are they always playing games? Go for the head. It makes for some very hype moments, so I don't actually mind that much. But anytime a bad guy says, "I wasn't trying earlier," good. Die. I've seen people explain the discrepancies here in 2 different ways, saying that Gyutaro was a lot stronger than its rank gave him credit for without his burden of a sister, and that Muichiro was just a lot stronger than Usui, so he just had an easier time. And while it's all well and good to make the story make sense, it doesn't make me any less disappointed with the season. Shonen kinda lives and dies by its escalation. We've definitely seen it done terribly when shows go on for too long, where you go from characters that are barely potty trained to gods fighting by throwing planets at each other. So yeah, it's not always a good thing. And I understand that shows can't just trend upwards forever. There's always gonna be a drop. But they were the ones that raised the stakes so high in the first episode. It's not crazy of me to expect them to deliver. And 2 one-episode Hashira fights that climax to an extended Tom and Jerry chase scene was not what I had in mind. It's not like I didn't enjoy it at all. It still looks great. I enjoyed the new characters that were introduced, and I'm starting to appreciate that Nezuko is becoming less of a fucking prop each season. But alas, it didn't even kind of compare to the last season. So Demon Slayer can take a comfortable spot anywhere below number 5, also known as honorable mention. And there's one more show that gets a glorious spot here. I'll be honest, I didn't really keep up with Mashle for most of the season. The first episode was okay, and then the next handful felt like it was gonna be a gag comedy anime, which is fine, but not what I signed up for. Don't get me wrong, I like Eugenics as much as the next racist, but it seemed like anything serious was gonna be secondary to the comedy instead of 1-to-1, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I'm just not a fan. I've been trying to get through Gintama for years, but I came back to it because the character interactions and the comedy style kinda reminded me of Saiki Kusuo. Great show, by the way, if you haven't seen it. I do like how they very unapologetically ripped off Harry Potter to make a parody, and they seem to have faithfully gotten the Harry Potter spirit, especially with how student safety seems to be taking a back seat at this institution. Seriously though, is losing kids just another Tuesday at the school? Students are killing other students at the school and the headmaster just sees friendly rivalry? Also, I'm not sure that the macronutrient content of cream puffs is enough to explain this physique, but I digress. Anyway, I appreciate what they were going for, and there were a few times that the show actually made me laugh, but it was only really towards the end that I actually started getting into it, mostly because the first half was just them running the same joke into the ground. If the first 6 episodes had the same balance of humor and substance as the last 6 episodes, then maybe I could have made this list. There were just a lot of better shows this season. Or maybe I just have no sense of humor. Now join Demon Slayer in the runner-up bin. Now let's get to the real list. Number 5 had a lot of things going against it in my mind. Slice of Life is always hit or miss for me because without any overarching plot, the show is solely reliant on the characters to carry it. So one dogshit character can make me drop the whole thing. And so many of them are just so boring. Why am I skipping my dull and mundane life to watch someone else's dull and mundane life? Also, I hate romance anime. I have a whole video on that, but long story short, I just rarely see it done well. So no Slice of Life rom-com will ever be on this list. At least that's what I thought before I watched Skip and Loafer. I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I really don't know what they did because none of the characters were especially unique on their own, but this group dynamic was fun to watch. And Mitsume was a lot more endearing than I expected her to be. Because a lot of times they do too much with naive and awkward characters in anime to the point where it borders a disability. But they did a good job here of not going overboard overboard. If you kept up with the season, you'll know there was a lot of trauma-inducing shit that aired. And this was a nice palate cleanser. I did have one criticism, and that was that these two got on unbelievably fast. Like, they just met, and then I blinked and they were joined at the hip. It was a bit unrealistic. But that's easy to get past because it doesn't really affect the show going forward. I would rate it higher if not for the inherent nature of it being a slice of life. I don't know if it's the ADHD, but it's hard for me to sit through anything that's not consistently stimulating. Yes, like a child. And no amount of Adderall can make me watch more than one episode of the show at a time. And I was able to binge everything else on this list, so number 5. Okay, so this is awkward. When I did my video for the new shows of the season, link in the little eye thing, by the way, I said Oshinoko had the best first episode, and a lot of people thought the same. Though if they couldn't accomplish that in an hour and a half, that'd be concerning. Either way, it showed the most promise from a storytelling perspective, for me at least. So how did we get here? I will say this before I get any hate. I really enjoyed Oshinoko. It was one of the only shows that I kept up with weekly for the whole season. It looked great, I liked the characters for the most part, and I enjoyed everything they were trying to do in each of the 4 story arcs they put into the show. But that's the problem. 4 arcs in 11 episodes. One of those was just the entirety of the first episode, and I already said they did that well. But the rest of it felt so rushed. I don't know how they managed that one. It seemed like there were a lot of cool dynamics that I think should have just been fleshed out more. I can understand why they wanted to get to the first concert by the end of the season, but the amount of time they gave everything else with Aqua compared to this made it seem like this idol stuff was just tacked on at the end. Which is odd considering it was being set up as a main plot point earlier on. And it kinda led to Aqua and every other side character being fleshed out way more than Ruby over the season. Like, I know just as much nothing about her as I did when she was still a whining little parasite baby. I don't know if the intention was for her to be a side character, but that's what she felt like the whole time after episode 2. And Kana seemed more like the secondary lead. But maybe that's the goal? I don't know, man. It seemed weird to me. And it didn't help that anytime things got good, we moved on from it so fast. And that the last episode was used mostly to set up for the second season, even though it was the same episode as the climactic concert. I think it needed more episodes to put it over the line. The line of number 4, which is where it is. It's a good show, but it's no number 1, that's for sure. Let me stop now before I get hurt. I was actually really looking forward to the show because even though I didn't watch the rah, I really loved Baccano. Almost enough to actually read the light novels, but come on. So Dead Mount Deathplay was probably the show I was most looking forward to this season. And being at number 3 means it wasn't a complete disappointment. It's like a kinda supernatural, kinda isekai, kinda crime drama. About a necromancer from generic crap fantasy world being reincarnated into the normal world into a boy with a hit out on him. I did enjoy a lot of the characters in this one, though one of them took a while to grow on me. And though the animation was a little lacking compared to other things this season, I did like the character designs. The whole reverse isekai thing isn't really a new concept. My mind goes back to Recreators, but that show was doing a little too much by the end. By the time there are 10 plus fantasy characters getting isekai'd into the real world, it's not gonna be the real world anymore. And it wasn't. So I appreciate the angle they took on this one with just one immortal corpse god having to adhere to the rules of our world amongst a group of assassins. Well, it was still a fresh touch. And I liked that the non-supernatural subplot going on was just as engaging as the supernatural stuff. Another problem Recreators had. If there's one thing I would say was my main criticism, it's that the show did seem a little unnecessarily edgy at some points. And that's saying a lot after talking about a show with character names like Abyss Razor. But seriously. There are times when it's got good pacing and humor, and then times when it turns into Future Diary. Although I guess with a name like Dead Mount Deathplay, this is probably the best I could hope for. Also, even though all of the other characters are supposed to be regular humans, some of these criminals were the most inhuman humans I've seen in a show. I can see how a show like this might not be for everyone. And I feel like people might think I'm trolling by saying I liked it more than Oshinoko, but the style and the characters just hit all the right spots for me. And it had a lot of the plot points that I usually enjoy in anime without feeling too generic. I might have put it higher if not for the disgustingly disappointing way they ended it, which I'm treating like a hate crime. So it's at number 3. Make your own list. It was hard to decide between these top 2 shows, for a couple of episodes. I'm not really a fan of anything body horror-esque, because I'm a wuss. But The Hell's Paradise set up their mystery really well, and I kinda couldn't look away, despite how badly I wanted to. I also learned that once you get rid of the degenerate nipple, you can show pretty much anything on Japanese television. And the characters grew on me pretty fast. Or like, most of them did. In my opinion, it's usually pretty useless to get flashbacks for characters you just met, because I don't care about them. The Hell's Paradise did a good job in using it sparingly so that it's enough for an introduction, but doesn't take up the whole episode. And don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying most of the SI I'm on, so I'm happy they're there. But I thought the point of sending death row inmates was to use expendable lives. So why are you also sending 10 of your best executioners with them? Doesn't that defeat the purpose? One thing that I will criticize the show for, just one, is that they seem to like introducing dangers in one episode just to have them be completely irrelevant by the next. next. I'm not even gonna talk about the big monsters that seemed like a big deal for a second because they actually injured Gabimaru and then they get destroyed pretty immediately after. Instead, I want to talk about the butterflies. These ugly things. In episode 3, this guy gets stung by one and has to immediately chop his hand off before he turns into a plant. And then thousands of them burst out from the forest. They're literally everywhere in episode 3. All over the place. Sounds pretty dangerous, right? But our group is skilled, they should be able to dodge some bugs, right? Well, I'll never know. The bugs are gone by the next episode. Like, sure, we can just assume that our main characters just skillfully dodged the bugs all the way through the forest, or that the guy who controls the bugs just decided to take a siesta for a few episodes. But why did they even introduce the bugs then? For shock factor? I'm nitpicking a little with the butterflies, but this felt like a pattern for the whole season. Anything that was introduced as a threat would end up being nothing by the next episode. And I'm not sure if that's a pacing issue or an overpowered characters issue, which is unfortunate, because I thought the show did a good job with the storytelling and imagery to make a place that was interesting and unsettling. But after watching Gabimaru curb stomp what I thought was supposed to be the final boss of the island, I wasn't really scared of them anymore. I still really enjoyed the show, and I'm sad that it only got 13 episodes. After this and Chainsaw Man, I think Shonen Jump's more than made up for whatever Ch-Ch-Ch-CHIA said was. I'm not even sure how many people were watching Heavenly Delusion because it was on Disney Plus for some reason. I'll do my best not to spoil just in case, but I'll probably spoil a little bit. I highly recommend that everyone watch the show though, unless you're sensitive to triggers of any kind, because this show goes to some dark places. But I feel like I haven't seen a mystery done this well in a while. You're given the setting of a post-apocalyptic world following two groups of people, a bunch of kids in some school facility place blocked off from the outside, and two people on the outside searching for a place called Heaven. You really aren't given much else at the start. You don't know how these places relate to each other, when both of these stories are taking place, what the hell these kids are, what happened to the world, where are all the scary ass monsters from, who's a boy, who's a girl, who's a boy whose brain has been transplanted into a girl, is incest cool in this world or is Haruki just a little freak? So many important questions. And the show doesn't hold your hand at all, so it's actually rewarding when you figure things out. And it's not only the mystery that was done really well, they do a really good job at evoking the right emotions out of you. Certain artistic choices and camera angles do a good job of giving you a sense of urgency or dread. Some of the monsters were genuinely scary, and the unsettling moments were really unsettling, like sometimes hard to get through. When Haruki stood in front of that man-eater with his little pea shooter, I actually had to pause the video and I was scared to play it again. I sat there for a while like, what is this little shit about to do right now? Yeah, I wish I never saw that. There are a lot of things I wish I never saw in the show. If you know, you know. And the voice acting was really good. I was impressed with Maru's voice actor in particular, especially because he's fairly new. He voice acted 3 different main characters this season. Good thing 2 of them don't matter. And then the animation, man. It had no reason being as good as it was. Like, I'm trying to find reasons to shit on it. I think the ending was a bit lukewarm, but the whole season was pretty consistent in quality throughout. And I can't wait for season 2 to come out in time for my grandkids to see it. Well, that's the end of the list. Overall, this was the best anime season in a while. If there's a show you enjoyed this season that's not on this list, then I probably didn't finish it or start it. And there must have been a damn good reason for that, so I'd like to see you justify any of the other shows this season in the comments. And maybe subscribe while you're down there. Just a suggestion.